so we need to finish talking about the vowels, types, and direct marketing, and then talk about types of direct marketing. Let's see if I can get the screen to come up. There we go. I'm going to move into, good morning, how are you? Move into other types besides directs or besides professional selling. After we finish talking about the vowels types, I'm just trying to see if I can get this to make sure that we've got. Yep, we have volume, so that's good. So last time, according to my notes, we had talked about achievers on the vowels type, which are people that have high access to resources. Again, just as sort of a recap. And when we talk about marketing appeals, these can apply to not just direct marketing, but other types of appeals as well. Advertising, for example, can also use these types of combinations with social style and vowels type to come up with winning campaigns that businesses can use to promote their products and services to consumers based on the types of appeals that are going to be most attractive to the target market. So we had talked about innovators, I think thinkers, believers. We were on achievers. Achievers are high access to resources. Oftentimes, though, they're the first in their family to have gone to college and become professional. They tend to be people that are of the learned professions, doctors, lawyers, things like that, but maybe the first in their family to do that. So they view wealth as a legitimate sign of knowledge and power. They want to show that. They are interested in activities and technology that is useful and allows them to be productive. And so we were looking at coupling these, what would achievers like in terms of dining experiences in Oklahoma City? Well, I think if you think about Vast at the top of the Devon Tower, that's something that achievers, at least when it first opened, would be attracted to because it's, sort of expensive. It was kind of elitist. And it's sort of a symbol of saying, I have arrived. Whereas thinkers, on the other hand, who are more established, often older, tend to not necessarily look at the flash. And we talked about that. Things like in the past, the coach house or the metro might be attracted to those kinds of people. So strivers, these are people who want to achieve something. They have a high rate of turnover in employment. They often find it difficult. So strivers generally want to become achievers, but they find it difficult. Again, many of these are first generation. They may have gone to college, and this is one of the things, this is my shameless plug for why you want to get a sales degree at UCO. In the past, it used to be that if you went to college and got a college degree, you were pretty much guaranteed that you were going to at least achieve middle class success. That if you could go to college, it didn't really matter what degree you got, companies would hire you. And that's because the vast majority of people didn't go to college. That started to change in the Vietnam War era. Two things contributed to this. The first was, as people recognized that for the first time in American history, that maybe they didn't want to go off and fight. This was completely different from the sentiments that we had in World War I and World War II, where there was a sense of patriotism and duty about going off and fighting. Now, it wasn't that, and historians again would be horrified at my simplification of this, but during World War I and World War II, there were isolationist movements in the United States. But once we were committed to those engagements. And in World War II, it became very clear when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor that we couldn't stay out of the fighting. And so, that was a huge blow to the American ego, that we had been sucker punched basically by the Japanese in our own military base, and people fervently supported the war. We then, after World War II, go through Korea, and that's the first war that the United States doesn't really win. And it's not clear to me that there is a winner in the Korean War. If you just look at the number of body bags that came back, we killed far more of the Koreans than they did of us. And we basically fought to a draw. And there is still to this day in North and South Korea. After Korea, we engaged in the Vietnam War, and this became enormously unpopular. And so for the first time in history, people started going to college, particularly young men, to avoid the draft, to avoid going into the Vietnam War. And I think college professors were pretty sympathetic at that point in time to these individuals. And so we saw a huge increase in the number of people that started going to college. Historically, it had been a very small number that went to college. This war effort, because you got a deferment for the draft, led to more and more people going to college. And then after Vietnam, we had something called the GI Bill, which encouraged people who had been in the service to go and get a college degree. And so we started seeing larger and larger numbers of people going to college. And so what had historically been an elite sort of preparation and would assure you of a middle class standing, all of a sudden became far more open to the masses. Now, it took many, many years for that to occur to the point where it's now college degrees are highly specialized, and you can't just go and get a college degree and any business is going to take you. Again, when my mother went to college, she was a product of the Vietnam era. If you got a degree in English, my mother got a degree in English and she became a teacher. And because she could write and communicate well, she got snapped up into the business world and then became an entrepreneur. And it really didn't matter what sort of degree you got. It was just as long as you had a degree, you were going to achieve that sort of middle class standing in life. Now, students come in and they ask me, should I continue with college given the enormous expense that I have and the debt that I'm probably going to accumulate, and I'm not guaranteed that I'm going to make middle class? And my response to that is, that's correct. When my mother went to college, you were going to be guaranteed a middle class lifestyle if you went to college, unless, something else happened, like you were a drunk or a drug addict or something like that. You were probably going to achieve middle class status. Now, it's not a guarantee of success. What I can guarantee you is that if you don't go to college, your chances of achieving middle class success are very limited. Now, that's not true for professional sales students. Generally, our professional sales students get good jobs and they make more money their first year out of college than a lot of people. I mean, it's well above the median income for this area. So all of this is to say that strivers, a lot of them are people that have now gone to college. They want to be achievers, but they're finding it hard to cross over. And maybe it's because they've gotten a degree in something that's completely useless, like musical theater, in which case, you can be the most talented person in Oklahoma City and there's still 50 million people ahead of you in Hollywood and New York and Nashville and all these other places where people tend to go for making success in the entertainment industry. And so they're finding it hard. So these tend to be the center of sort of hipster culture. And you find them in places like the Paseo and the Plaza District. So what kinds of restaurants do you think would be attractive to strivers? Low access to resources, but are motivated by achievement.
Could you repeat the question?
What I was asking was what restaurants are attractive to these various groups. To think about this, so this is the critical thinking challenge, is to match a restaurant with each of these types of groups. So Innovators, we talked about that they're gonna be, for example, interested in sort of, what is newest and latest and greatest, and at cost is no option. So things like Lou Divine, which has a very sort of exotic menu, would be attractive to innovators. Thinkers, I came up with the Coach House. So for strivers, what kinds of restaurants do you think are gonna be attractive to people who are wanting to make it, but have a hard time breaking out of or breaking into the middle class, but motivated by achievement?
I would say like the restaurants in Plaza District.
Like which one specifically?
Empire.
Okay, what is Empire's menu?
It's mostly pizza, but they have other stuff.
Okay.
too.
Yeah, I think a lot of the venues in Plaza and Paseo are gonna be attractive to these people. When about 10 years ago, something started, this was the early entry into the food truck movement. So when I was a kid growing up, food trucks were, I mean, it was junk food. It was corn dogs and, you know, snow cones and things like that. That's not what modern food trucks are anymore. They have all kinds of food, and it's not necessarily cheap either anymore. Food trucks were, you'd get a corn dog at the local vendor, on the street corner in New York City for $1, $1.50 or something like that. That's no longer necessarily the case. But there was a place called H&8, Hudson and 8th, that started, and they would have once a month, like the food trucks would come in, and it would be more exotic food trucks than just sort of corn dogs and hamburgers and things like that. And I think that would be attractive to strivers, those kinds of food trucks. There's a restaurant collective, and it's called The Collective. It's a group of restaurants that are in sort of Midtown. They're, it's not quite fast food. It's not casual dining. It's sort of this, yeah, they've got this bar. It's kind of a hip place to hang out. I think that's another one that would be attractive to strivers in terms of, thinking about our typologies here. What was the other one that I was going to come up with? I had it on the tip of my tongue. So The Collective. Oh, if you've ever been on 23rd in Oklahoma City, there's a restaurant. I can't stand it, but one of my favorite bartenders went to work there, so I go there from time to time just to see him, called Guyutes. Have any of you been there? No? It's kind of, you find people with interesting facial hair in there. So, the kind of street culture, hipster type hangs out there. So self-expression, if you're motivated by self-expression and you have high access to resource, you're an experiencer. So experiencers are the people that are going to be going skydiving, because that's not a sport that is cheap to get into. And so, if you've been to iFly on Memorial Road, I think that would be attractive to experiencers. So they have high access to resources, motivated by self-expression. What kinds of restaurants do you think experiencers, I forgot to give you a duck. What kinds of restaurants do you think experiencers would be attracted to?
I think that like expensive places that you're essentially paying for the ambiance over the food quality.
Okay.
In some aspects you only pay for the food quality, like Mahogany or like maybe a P.F. Chang's. It's not as expensive, but it's like,
Okay.
Yeah.
So Mahogany is a steakhouse,
Yeah.
and you're paying for the whole experience of it's not just the food, it's about the whole like evening of things. All right. So yeah, I think that's probably correct. Again, you could find several of these types at different restaurants. I think I talked about Lou Divine and innovators. I think Lou Divine is another one that might be attractive to experiencers, because it is about sort of the dining experience. It's not just about one aspect of it. It's not just about, if you go to Vast, it's pretty much about like seeing the skyline and, being at the place that's very expensive and obviously sort of making a statement about where you are. low access to resources and motivated by self-expression, those are makers. These are the kinds of people that, how many of you have been to something in Oklahoma City? They have, I think it's twice a year, an event at the fairgrounds called a Fair of the Heart. Anybody been to that? Anybody know what it is? Don't know what it is. So a Fair of the Heart is this big show of, it started out primarily as crafting stuff, but now a lot of it is already pre-made, but it's arts and crafts stuff. It's not necessarily, you know, high-end. This is not the stuff that you're gonna find in the galleries on Canyon Road in Santa Fe, New Mexico, or the galleries in New York City. This is stuff, it's the combination of, you know, sort of flowers along with, you know, fake flowers along with the signs that say, you know, dream big or things like that, that are these punchy little, you know, vapid sayings that people put up on their walls, these posters, you know, that they came up with. It's kind of a combination of the Franklin Covey meets Hobby Lobby kind of stuff. So these you know, like motivators along with the decorative arts. And you find stuff still at a Fair of the Heart that, you know, you can make yourself, but a lot of it is already pre-made, and it's stuff that you can put up, you know, in your house that have little motivations. I hate to admit this, but one of my nieces has all this crap all over her house that she just built. She's built what's called an urban farmhouse, and she's got all of these little, you know, boxes that say, you know, dream big, or, you know, love is all it takes, or whatever. So they're going to be attracted to events like that. So they're interested in sort of the arts and crafts and making stuff. Experiencers who have high access to resources, they may be interested in making stuff. Again, there's a group that goes around, and it's called the Tipsy Artist, where they teach you how to do an oil painting or an acrylic painting in an hour and a half while drinking cheap wine. That might be something that would be interesting to experiencers, whereas makers are going to be, you know, looking at like this stuff that you find at a Fair of the Heart. So what kinds of restaurants do you think would be attractive to makers? Again, low access to resources. So low access to resources, but motivated by self-expression. You're also going to find that these people are, I think, in my opinion at least, big on the outdoors and guns and things like that. Anybody been to H&H Gun Range? Two of you have? They have a cafe in there, and there's another gun range now that's opened up, I guess, that has a whole restaurant associated with it. I think that would be something that would be attractive to makers, things like that. The lowest, these people, survivors, lowest access to resources, the most likely to still have a landline. Any of you still have a landline? I used to, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I used to ask people this, and I would get one or two that would admit that they still had a landline because they had an alarm system, and you had to have a landline if you were going to be connected to an alarm system. That's no longer true. They'll install alarm systems that will have a cellular notification to, you know, to the security. So you no longer even have to have a landline for your alarm system. So survivors, the lowest access to resources, the most likely to have a landline, least likely to have a computer. I know this is incredible to believe that in the 21st century in the United States that there are people who don't have access to computers, that don't have computers.
Are these the type of people that are like against the government and stuff like that, or?
Maybe, I think you're more likely to find the conspiracy theorists, I think, in the makers
Okay.
category, because makers have some access to resources.
Mhm.
Obviously, they're, I mean, they're gonna be at gun shows and things like that, which means that they have some. Survivors generally, these are people, they tend to be older. And so now they may be conspiracy theorists because they're watching Fox News 24/7. Although a lot of these people, they're the most likely to not have access to cable. So they're not, if you don't have access to cable, you're not watching Fox News. I mean, you can get Fox News if you don't have cable by, going online, but they're the least likely to be online. They're the least likely to have any computer access. If they do, they may actually go to the public library to use it.
Yeah, my stepfather-in-law like has a flip phone, like he doesn't have.
Yeah, I mean, that's now not all, you'll find people who are thinkers that still have flip phones. For example, my best friend's father, who has a degree in history from OU and owns a business, he just does not like technology. I mean, he likes traditional intellectual pursuits, and he has to have a flip phone because there's just almost no land-based phones anymore, and he's got a business, so he has to, but he has a flip phone. But yes, you're right, there are a lot of these that there are likely to be the ones that are on Cricket Wireless that have a government phone that's not gonna be necessarily like this device that has everything. So survivors, lowest access to resources, just kind of the reason that they fall outside of these. So innovators are motivated by both ideals, achievement, and self-expression. They have a touch of all of those. Survivors, it's hard to tell what they're motivated by because they're just sort of trying to make it through life. They oftentimes are older, the most likely to live in rural areas where they don't have things. So what kind of restaurant do you think is going to be? I think this one is glaringly obvious, but students almost never come up with this.
Probably like a mom and pop type of restaurant, like,
Okay, so maybe the local cafe,
yeah.
although the local cafe is getting pretty expensive in many places. I think these are the ones that you're most likely to find at McDonald's. Now, that's not to say, like, I went through, obviously, I love McDonald's coffee. I will tell you that McDonald's has far better coffee than Starbucks. So I go through McDonald's and I get 2 large coffees almost every morning. And so obviously I am not a survivor, right? I mean, I'm not a survivor, but it's like, there's one thing at McDonald's I really love. It's their coffee. And in every blind taste test, McDonald's beats Starbucks and if you like coffee. Now, Starbucks has all of this other stuff,
Yeah.
right? I mean, like, Starbucks is really not about coffee. Starbucks is about selling you a coffee-based product that is, got cream and caramel, and McDonald's is trying to compete in that marketplace. That's what the McCafe is. So they have now a Frappuccino or something like that, which is, much to my horror and disgust because that's not really coffee. That's like an ice cream drink. But survivors are the most, they're like, they think McDonald's is great. Why? It's cheap, although it's not as cheap as it used to be. It's fast, it's consistent. It's, there's a group of these guys that every morning in Guthrie, where I live, that go to McDonald's and they get the senior, you can get a senior cup of coffee and a sausage McMuffin for $1.50. And so that's, that's just where they are. So I think like McDonald's is definitely like for survivors. Anything others that you can think of that would be attractive to people who are just getting by? If you watch Food Inc., you'll see not necessarily older survivors, but there's a couple that they interview about how they go through McDonald's, and in spite of the fact that they know that it's enormously unhealthy for them. The husband of this, have any of you watched Food Inc.? You should watch it. You will want to become a vegetarian. I have managed to go, actually, the first time I tried to become a vegetarian, it lasted 3 hours until I got hungry. And then I've progressively gotten better. I worked up to 1 day a week, meatless Mondays, because if you really care about animals, I don't think you can watch that show and not be sort of moved by it. I can make it to about 3 days now without eating meat. But I've even started making some vegan dishes, which I never thought I would ever do because I was born and raised on a cattle ranch.
Oh.
But there's this couple in that Food Inc. that are featured as one of the people, and they're talking about, you know, how hard it is to eat healthy food because they've got one car. I think they live in the LA area, which means that they have to drive hours and hours and hours. So they've got to get their kids to school, they've got to drop the wife off at work, and then the husband has to take the car. And so, you know, what can you get through quickly and cheaply and feed everybody so that they're not starving to death in the morning? Well, it's McDonald's. You can get, you know, a lot of food for not a lot of money. You can still get stuff on the value meal for not a lot of money. So combining these social styles with Val's types, I think, gives us an idea of the kinds of pitches that we're going to make. And these can be used beyond just direct marketing. Again, you can use these in advertising, in making your appeals attractive to various groups, right? And reaching those groups. If you're thinking about thinkers, how do you reach them and what kinds of ads are going to be attractive to them? Those people are actually maybe, and there are some interesting dichotomies where you find that these groups like similar things, just maybe different types of magazines. For example, thinkers, because they tend to be older and attracted to traditional intellectual pursuits, are likely to be subscribers to magazines. It's just that they're not using or looking at Field and Stream, which is what you'd find makers reading, right? So they might be attracted to things like the Robb Report, which is a magazine for, you know, the affluent, but it's going to predict, or it's going to present products that are more, you know, more attractive to that group of people. But why is it that thinkers still like actual magazines? Why is it that people like me actually still like to read a book? Because that's sort of what we grew up doing, and it's a traditional, you know, academic pursuit, and I can make notes in the margins and things like that, and I can, you know, get the information at my pace rather than watching an ad. All right. So other types. So let's talk about types of direct marketing. Slideshow. So in the promotional mix, we use a number of intermediaries to move products through the channels from producer to consumer. Many of these in today's market are disintermediating. So if you go back to the beginning, historically speaking, for most of human history, people dealt directly with the producers of the things that they purchased, because goods were not mass produced prior to the Industrial Revolution. You would buy your stuff from sort of the local area. Once we get to the Industrial Revolution, that's no longer the case. And so, for example, with Ford's car company, you didn't buy directly. You didn't go to Detroit or to Michigan and buy a car. So you went from, you know, the car manufacturer to a dealer to the consumer. Then, as we got more complicated, moving beyond sort of Henry Ford's Model T, we then got all kinds of intermediaries that specialized in the movement of goods from producer to consumer. So in many instances, you would have, for example, historically, let's think about like a computer. You would have, you know, the producer, the manufacturer, who would sell to a wholesaler who would sell to a retailer who would then sell to consumer. What the internet has done in some instances has allowed for us to go back to what we had before and remove these people and sell direct to consumers. There was a disintermediation in the flow of goods from producer to consumer. Dell, for example, did this. What computers and the internet allowed for, in some instances, was the mass customization of products and being sold directly from producer to consumer. What made that possible in many instances was things like the mail. And once we got the mail, you saw some disintermediation with the advent of catalogs, which were producers that would put out a catalog, Eddie Bauer, things like that. Filson, if you know what Filson is, sold by catalogs. They now have stores, and they would sell directly to consumers. That's become even more efficient with the entry into the market of, beyond just the postal service, UPS, FedEx, and now Amazon, right? So we have a lot of companies that are going direct. Now, in some instances, what we've seen is a re-intermediation of products. So Dell was one of the first companies that you can think of in contemporary times to really disintermediate. Historically, if you wanted to buy a computer, where did you go to buy the computer? Well, you went to a computer store. When I was a kid, one of the places that you would go to buy, these early computers, which didn't do very much, was something like Radio Shack. Or you would go to a local, not big chain store and buy your computer. When my mother bought her first computer for her business in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is a real estate business, it was an IBM. There were these independent dealers who bought computers from IBM and then sold to local markets. Then we got sort of big box retailers moving into that space, like Best Buy, that would sell you computers and things like that. Dell, the way you bought a Dell for a long period of time was you went online and you ordered your Dell. And it was an example of value co-creation. You decided sort of what kinds of things you wanted to do with this computer and what kinds of processing speeds you needed. Now, it turns out that most people are not terribly technologically savvy, and most people just sort of had kind of a standard package of stuff. What do most people use computers for? Well, when I was growing up, and getting into college, what did I need a computer for? Well, primarily my main use of a computer was for word processing. I know that you are going to find this hard to believe, but so my mother had this computer, and when we moved to Oklahoma, we brought the computer with us. It was an IBM PC. It ran on, and you can see remnants of this. It ran on these things called floppy disks. So if you open up a Word document, all right, so here's a blank document. And switch products. Why is this not? Oh, I don't know why we're having so much issues with this. There we go. Blank document, and of course, because it doesn't realize that I have a product key, but the thing I want to show you is up at the corner where you click to save your file, this icon that's used is a display of a floppy disk, which were actually at that point not floppy. So the first floppies that my mother had in this computer were these large 8x5 things that were actually floppy, and they were really fragile, and you kept them in a file box, and you put them in these sleeves, and you put them into the machine, and you saved your work on these machines. And so if you wanted to type, for example, a document, you could type it, but you had to kind of know a little bit about coding in that first machine to get things like, for example, if you wanted this to be centered, now what you do is you go up and you click the little icon for center. At that point in time, you had to write, you coded it, you'd say at parentheses center, and then and then you'd follow with what you wanted and then close the parentheses, and it would center it on the page. So what did I want a computer for when I first went to college? Well, it was mostly in high school, my papers, because this computer thing that my mother had was so cumbersome to deal with. I actually typed my papers in high school. But by the time I got to college, they had improved, and we now had sort of these more user-friendly interfaces called GUIs, graphical user interfaces. And so I was interested in getting a computer so that you could, word process your term papers in college, which was much more efficient, because if you made a mistake with a typewriter, you either had to just tear up the page or you had to go back and correct it using, now the typewriters that I grew up with had actual correction tape in them, so you could hit the correct key and it would go back and it would type over with this, with this kind of liquid paper kind of stuff. But if you made big mistakes, or if you had taken the paper out of the typewriter before you realized that you had made a mistake, you were pretty well screwed, and it meant that you were going to retype the page for the most part. So computers come along, and now they've got these graphical user interfaces, and it's easier to type stuff. So, I go to college, and what do I really want to use a computer for? Well, it was really primarily for word processing, so that I could do my term papers. And if you made a mistake, it was easy to fix. You just go, back in and you'd go through and fix it. When I went to college, they still required footnoting. And this was really a challenge, again, with typewriters, because you had to sort of plan how much space you were going to need at the bottom of the page to footnote. Well, the first product that I used was called WordPerfect, and that allowed you to just say insert footnote. You would, hit an icon and it would insert a footnote at the bottom of the page, and it sort of figured it out for you. So primarily it was used for word processing. Now I would suggest that the vast majority of people use their devices not so much for word processing, but the biggest thing that you're probably using your device for is some form of entertainment. It's to watch YouTube, or to play games, or to, get on Facebook or Pinterest, or whatever it is that you're interested in now. So Dell allowed you to mass customize, but it turns out that most people actually didn't need to mass customize this product, because we're all kind of using it for the same stuff. And so there's been a re-intermediation with Dell, because you don't need to go online and buy it. And particularly with regard to these devices that you all have in here, these smaller computing devices, the biggest thing that you want to know is, like, how does it actually feel? How heavy is it? Can I pick it up? Is it easy to transport along? Is the screen big enough for me to see? And those are things that you can't really tell without touching the actual device, right? Can you actually work on, for example, what are you using? Is that
It's a Surface.
so it's a tablet that you have a keyboard that you're attached to. Can you actually work on that? I mean, laptops are, kind of wonderful things that you can take them everywhere, but I'm looking at the screen over here that has the PowerPoint, and I pulled up a Word doc over here, and it's hard to do although now they have screens that you can attach to your other screens so that you can get two, and you have more surface area and you're able to work more efficiently. But my point is that Dell disintermediated. They have now gone to selling their products in stores where people can actually go and buy them and touch them and see, because we really don't need all of that much of a mass customization. But we do have the ability to mass customize, and direct marketing allows you to do that. It allows you to disintermediate and go direct to consumers, and things that I never thought that we would buy directly, we now can buy directly from the producers. So a lot of producers are going direct. One of the things that I buy a lot of are French cuff shirts. I never thought I would buy clothing online, but I have a company that I know that makes shirts the way I want them to fit. And it's easy to return it. In the early ages of the internet, when people first started going online and buying stuff, it was difficult to return stuff. It's not hard to return stuff anymore. You don't even have to necessarily leave your house. You can, set it out and they'll come and pick it up and take it back. And so it's not all that difficult. So direct marketing is a system of marketing, but that allows organizations to communicate directly with targeted customers and to generate a response or a transaction. So the internet has been a huge movement forward in our ability to talk and communicate directly with customers and take their orders and process transactions and things like that. Again, in the early ages of the internet, it was largely static pages. So you'd go and you'd get information, and then you'd have to call them and, order it or whatever. That's not the case anymore. You can order directly online from most of these places. However, it is kind of annoying. I actually kind of wish that we would go back to the good old days in some instances where you can actually talk to a live person. Because if you have a problem, as wonderful as artificial intelligence has become at answering questions that are sort of basic that you need, there are times when you want to talk to an actual, like, real live person. So, for example, I'll give you an example. Sam's, if you want to order directly from Sam's Club, they send you an email if you forgot your password. Well, I hadn't ordered anything from Sam's Club online in probably 10 years, because it's just not something that I go online and order from. I mostly use Sam's for my business and picking up stuff. And so I haven't actually ordered anything online in 10 years. And the email address that I had so that I could order something online, one of my employees who doesn't have a Sam's membership she'd found this thing that only Sam's sells, and she wanted me to buy it. And so I went online. They only sell it online. They don't sell it in the stores at all. And so I went online, and the email address that I had given Sam's for my account was my email address from when I was at New Mexico State University and teaching there. I haven't had that account for 10 years. And literally, they're like, send a password send a link to reset your password at this address. And I'm like, I don't have that address. So I'm trying to call, and you can't actually get a real person. So I went actually to Sam's and I'm like, can you help me? And of course, the people in the store have no idea about online, and it's like, I wish we would go back to actually having some ability to call a real person. It took me like 3 days to get this worked out with Sam's, to actually get to like where they could solve the problem. But we can do a lot of this online, and we can do a lot of it. It's becoming more and more sophisticated with the artificial intelligence that's able to take care of many of the problems that we had. So direct marketing is becoming, again, more and more prevalent in a lot of situations. So what was allowed for the growth of direct marketing? Well, it was in the early ages, the expansion of the postal system. So that allowed for catalogs to be sent out, and you could order from the catalog, and that revolutionized buying. You no longer had to go to the general store to get stuff. You could buy all kinds of things from catalogs. There used to be a company called Sears and Roebuck. At one point in time, they were one of the largest companies in the world. You all don't even remember these. You've probably never seen a Sears and Roebuck catalog, but they called them the Wish Book, and they were huge. And you could order everything that you could think of at one point in time from the Sears and Roebuck catalog. I sit on the city council in Guthrie. That's my hometown or my adopted hometown. And we are one of the largest preserves of Victorian and Edwardian homes in the nation. Guthrie has more homes on the National Register, I think, than almost any other city in America from that era, from the Victorian and Edwardian era. And a lot of these homes you could actually order directly from Sears and Roebuck. They came as a kit and they would sell them to you, and you bought them through the catalog, and then you built them yourself. So you could buy entire homes. So one of the styles of these homes that was very popular, that we have a lot of in Guthrie, were actually called shotgun houses. And the reason that they were popular at the time, and the reason they were called shotgun houses, was because they said you could stand on the front porch and shoot chickens in the backyard with a shotgun without doing any damage to the house. So you could shoot straight through the house from the front door out the back door and shoot chickens in the backyard with a shotgun without doing any damage to the house. Why did they build these houses this way? Well, if you go back to the founding of the state and the territory of Oklahoma, we just had our 89er day celebration in Guthrie. So the state of Oklahoma was partly founded by the union, not partly, it was founded by the union of two territories. There was Indian Territory and Oklahoma Territory. And they combined to make one state, which became Oklahoma. So Oklahoma Territory was founded with a land run that started on April 22nd, 1889, and people lined up at a point north of here, north of the Cimarron River, and at high noon on April 22nd, 1889, they fired a cannon, and people ran on horseback, on wagon, some on bicycles, some on foot, for a chance to stake a claim and get free land that the government was basically giving away. They have a huge statue that is a tribute to this day down on the Oklahoma River, right near Bass Pro. They have these really wonderful bronze statues that highlight this. So you could buy these houses called shotgun houses from the Sears and Roebuck catalog, and that really revolutionized things. How did you get a house before? Well, you built it yourself out of materials that were around, or you hired, if you were wealthy, somebody to build it for you. And Sears and Roebuck would send these things to you, these houses, these kits called shotgun houses. And there were others that were more decorative, that were more elaborate, that you could buy directly from Sears and Roebuck. And that included all the parts. So they would send all the wood and everything that you needed to them. Then when we get to credit cards, that allows for an even bigger growth in direct marketing, because now we can easily pay for this stuff that we're buying from catalogs or from producers, however we contact them. Historically, that was by telephone, and now it's by computer, but consumer credit cards allowed an easy transaction. You no longer had to send money through the mail, which was risky, or send checks. You could give them the money over the phone and they would send you the goods. Dual income homes also allowed for the expansion of direct consumer marketing. And it also provides time compression. If you have two people that are working instead of one, historically, again, if we went back in time, households were one income producing, and that was primarily the father of the house was the biggest one who went out and earned a living, and the women stayed at home. And so they had time to go to the store and shop. Now you have both parents working. And so isn't it just easier to pick up and order, everything second day from Amazon Prime, in terms of, everything that we need, from toilet paper to toothpaste. Technology, obviously, the computers aided in our ability to do this. Changing values in terms of, this idea that we are pressed for time and that we need to maximize our efficiency has increased direct marketing. And of course, the ability to now not just go online and on a computer, but to have this device available for ordering. They're now coming up with things like refrigerators that will allow you to order. If the refrigerator detects that you are out of something, you can set it up to directly order from some supplier so that you're never out of things. Some of this has not been as successful as they'd hoped for it. Some of the smart home assistants that they thought people would use to order stuff, they're actually not using in the way, and so they're actually stopping supporting some of these. I think, what's the Google Assistant? I read an article, I think it's the Google Assistant. Is that, it's not Siri, is it Alexa? Is that the Google Assistant?
That's Amazon.
Is that Amazon? One of the ones that they thought that would be really popular and allowing people to just sort of use it as a method of, constantly ordering stuff, and it may have been Alexa. People aren't using it the way that they'd hoped. They're just using it primarily for entertainment and to find out and to fact check, but it's not increased Amazon's revenue at all. And so they're gonna not support, I think it is Amazon. And I think it's the Alexa. They're not gonna support it much longer. And so that has been one of those areas where we see sort of a retrenchment in terms of the sophistication of the devices that we're using. People are going back to, what might be considered more old school. So with regard to direct marketing, we can combine direct marketing with advertising. We can use direct marketing as a form of advertising. We can also combine direct marketing with PR, the solicitation of funds. So nonprofits are using this, combining direct marketing with PR events. If you think about how many of you have, and I flip the channel every time this comes on, the ASPCA ads. So that's a combination of PR, advertising, and direct marketing. Combining direct marketing with professional selling. So professional selling is a form of direct marketing, but you can also have, other aspects of direct marketing that are then combined with the most direct form of marketing, which is professional sales. So there's one of the companies that sponsors a lot of the competitions and comes to a lot of the competitions is called Tom James. Tom James is a customized producer of it started out as men's clothing, bespoke men's clothing, and everything was made to order. So that your Tom James representative would come out, they would measure you, they would go through your wardrobe, figure out what sorts of things you needed. They also now have, direct solicitation through email and catalogs and things like that. Direct marketing with sales promotion. This is, again, you can combine these. And sales promotion is in many instances a form of direct marketing. So coupons are becoming highly targeted in specifics. Historically, sales promotion, couponing, things like that was done through newspapers and inserts, and for example, the Sunday paper. And then combining direct marketing with support media, adding promotional products to direct mail, for example, to increase revenue. So what is the objective of direct marketing? Well, the objective, like all of marketing for the most part, is to get some kind of response, to help build your image, to maintain customer satisfaction. So it's easier to keep a customer, there's something called customer lifetime value, than it is to prospect for a customer and to inform and educate customers. Now again, if we combine social styles and val types, we can engage in highly sophisticated direct marketing and even what's called micro targeting, where you're targeting highly specific groups. So strategies in using direct marketing. You can use the one-step approach where you use one medium to obtain an order. You select one vehicle to obtain the order. So you put out your website and you drive traffic to that website and get the order. Lots of small businesses do this one-step approach. And lots of businesses that now are larger started out this way. There's a company in Edmond called Petra Industries. Have any of you ever heard of Petra Industries? That's kind of how they started out. Using sort of a one-step, website to driving traffic. Now, they have a multi-step approach. And if you order certain things from, I think, for example, from Best Buy, you're actually not ordering it from Best Buy, you're ordering it from Petra. You may go on the Best Buy website. So this is, Best Buy using an intermediary to fulfill orders. Or you can use a two-step approach, using more than one medium. So Tom James has salespeople, professional salespeople that go out and meet with clients. And again, historically, Tom James, everything I think was custom made. Shirts, suits, everything. I think the only thing that they didn't custom make was shoes. And Tom James largely, I think, partnered historically with Allen Edmond to provide shoes for the wardrobe. But they've now expanded to, they have stuff that's not necessarily custom made, that is off the rack, but is of higher quality. And you can find that on multiple platforms rather than just using the professional salesperson to come out and see it. The first step is usually to screen or qualify prospects if you're using a two-step approach. And then the second is to generate responses to that approach. So again, using Tom James, historically, they had these people that would qualify prospects, their sales force. That's expensive though, right? Professional selling is the most expensive form of marketing that you can engage in. It's also the one that is the most customizable because you've actually got a person that's dealing with somebody and can read their body language and understand and take feedback and understand that. So you use your first effort to screen or qualify and then to generate the response in your second effort. Direct mail. Again, this is going back to 2014, which seems like a lifetime ago. 46 billion was spent in direct mail. The average household receives something like 19 pieces of direct mail a week. I think that's increased exponentially. I receive all kinds of stuff. The vast majority of the mail that I get, I used to be, when I was a kid, you looked forward to the mail every day. Now it's just like, I don't get anything except junk mail in my mailbox, in my actual physical mailbox on my house, because everything I've done has gone online. I've gone paperless in all of my, sort of monthly bills. And so most of it is just stuff that I go through and have to shred because it's got some, identifiable source of information on it that I have to throw away. But direct mail is still important, and it's particularly important, again, if you think about the VALS types, which types of people are going to be persuaded by direct mail? Well, survivors, because they don't have access to computers in many instances, but also thinkers who don't necessarily use the computer except in ways that they view as being sort of beneficial to them. So my mother, for example, she still likes to get catalogs. She has obviously high access to resources. She has a master's degree. She was, has owned lots of businesses. She primarily uses technology as a way to stay in contact when her number two son, which is my brother, was living in New York with her grandkids. All of a sudden, she realized that my brother was using FaceTime as a way to engage in babysitting. He was giving the little kids, the phone to talk to Grandma Becky. And she's like, "Where are your parents?" And they're like, "Oh, they're at a dinner party downstairs." And she suddenly realized that she was being used as the electronic babysitter for her grandkids. But she still likes to get this stuff, she still has these things that she orders from online. And so it's still with kinds of those groups can still be a very powerful tool in marketing. The key to success in direct mail is having the ability to segment and maintaining mailing lists. This can be difficult. Now, historically speaking, again, among my mother's generation, not so much in mine, and I'm sort of an outlier, people bought a home and they stayed in the home, and that was one of the ways that you got to retirement. One of my employees asked me the other day, she said, "You're a business professor, you should know the answer to this." And I said, "Okay, what's the question?" And it depends on sort of what the question is, but it turns out that I did sort of, I think, know the answer to it. She said, "My friends all tell me that," you'll love this, "saving is for suckers." Because she said that her friends have all decided that they're gonna have to work until the day they die. And so why bother engaging in savings? Why bother putting money into a Roth IRA or something like that? And I can see some of you looking at me like she's an idiot, isn't she? She should be a candidate for natural deselection for even coming up with this question. Although I found it charming that, given her friend's attitude towards this, and obviously their influence over her, that she had the mother with to ask me the question as to whether or not she should engage in savings. She said, "Because I'm probably going to have to work, up until the day I die." I don't know that that's necessarily true. One of the things that students ask me, and I've become less emphatic about this point than I was in the past, but students will tell me, "I don't think Social Security will be there." I am relatively, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I would have said absolutely Social Security will be there when you retire. I'm less emphatic. I'm still about 95% sure that Social Security will be there when you retire. And why am I sure of that? I mean, if Social Security isn't there, we have probably, and I'm going to make a reference to a movie that none of you have ever seen, but you should go watch it. We are probably at Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome time. You've seen Mad Max Beyond Thunder, so you know what I'm talking about. Anybody else seen Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome? So Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome is a dystopian world where basically everything has collapsed and we are back to living in sort of tribal communities. And the sort of one of the lines from Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome is, the Thunderdome is a way of settling disputes in this, as I recall, I haven't seen the movie in a long time, in this dystopian world where it's two men enter, one man leaves, the Thunderdome. And so if Social Security doesn't exist, probably we're at that point, right? Where we're at sort of Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. As long as we have something that resembles, or we think resembles, a democracy. Again, we don't really have a democracy. I'd be glad to tell you why we don't. But we pay homage to the idea that we have a democracy. We're probably going to have Social Security. Why is that? Because old people vote, right? I mean, all these people, the reason that Ron DeSantis will lose is because he has threatened Social Security. I mean, Donald Trump even figured this out, that you can't threaten Social Security. And so Donald Trump is now going on, his super PAC is going on television advertising against Ron DeSanctimonious, as he calls him, against Ron's, votes to severely restrict or limit Social Security. So I think Social Security will be there. Pretty sure it's gonna be there as long as we have a form of government that resembles the form of government we have today. So she said, should I even bother to say it? And my response to that was yes. Because although you may have to work a lot longer than you would really like, saving is going to ensure that you can select the jobs that you want to work at when you get to be 65 or 66 or 67 or older than that. It's going to allow you the comfort of saying, I don't want to work in the Amazon warehouse where I'm having to pull 200 items and my knees are, I think by that point in time, we'll be pulling things with drones or something like that. But there will always be jobs that people don't really want to do, and saving will allow you to have that. So the reason I say all of this is because mailing lists are important with regard to this, and part of historically people's ability to retire was you paid off a home. You bought a home, you got a 30-year mortgage, you went to work and you paid off that mortgage and you stayed in that home, and because you paid it off, you could afford to retire. With regard to these mailing lists, the average person now moves far more frequently than they did in my parents' generation, where my parents bought a home, they got a 30-year mortgage, and they stayed in that home through retirement until the point where they could no longer stay in the home. That's not the way people live today. So even among people that are not your age, they move, far more frequently than they did in the past. And so the key to success is keeping these mailing lists current and the ability to segment those lists to be able to target. Of course, the biggest threat to direct mail is the internet. But again, right now, there are still lots of people in this country. And when we think about globally, there are lots of people around the world that don't have access necessarily to the internet. And so direct mail is still an important part in those areas. Catalogs have increased since 2007, but now they're available mostly online in both the B2B and B2C segment. But I will tell you, as a business owner, I still get a lot of catalogs. So we own a bed and breakfast. What kinds of supplies do bed and breakfasts need? Well, things like soap and towels and sheets and things like that. And National Hospitality, even though I order everything online, they still send me a catalog and I still actually look at it to see what new products they have coming out. Even though I can go online, I get the catalog and it's something to thumb through. So it has increased. Many are now online, but they're using both in many instances, particularly like in the B2B world. Uline still sends out a huge, I can't believe this, it's got to be huge. So Uline is one of these producers of all kinds of packaging products and goods and plastics. They send out this huge catalog and they send it to me. It's got to be enormously expensive to send that out, but they're still sending out these catalogs. And again, people like my stepdad, who is a retired FBI agent, obviously a thinker, has obvious high access to resources. He loves the Eddie Bauer catalog. He still gets and he loves the, anybody know what the big fly fishing, he loves to fly fish. And so he lives in northern New Mexico. Fly fishing is a big deal there. What's the big producer of fly fishing stuff? I think it started in, it's either Vermont or Connecticut.
Did the Bass Pro show?
No, Bass Pro started in Missouri, and you don't generally fish for bass with fly fishing. Fly fishing is generally trout.
Cabela's.
No, it's not Cabela's. Orvis. Orvis is They have all these stuff. He still gets those catalogs. The last time I checked. Email. The great thing about email is that it's highly targeted. It relies again on lists that you have to keep up to date. So for example, with regard to Sam's Club, I would be willing to bet that they've been sending all kinds of stuff to an email that once I left New Mexico State has been shut down, and has probably bounced back, which, hopefully they've taken that off the list, but they still had it, as the email address that I couldn't get my password from.
I still get.
Harvard, what?
I still get email on my AOL.
Oh, yeah, well, that's probably your junk email account now, right?
Mhm.
Like, your AOL account is your junk email account. People like open up whatever is the latest, they'll get to the point where that junk email is just so full that they stop checking it. How many of you have done this abandoned account? Like you had at one point in time, probably, how many of you had a Yahoo account? And you probably don't check it anymore. It's now and you've opened up a new account that is now probably gathering all this stuff. A Harvard study suggested that it's more effective than traditional direct mail when measured by ROI. Well, of course it is, because it costs nothing basically to send out emails. However, I would suggest that it's probably not all that effective, because if you are like me, one of the things that I tell students now is, if you want me to respond to you, send me a text message. I put it in the syllabus. My email account, I've had the UCO email since I was a graduate student here at UCO, which means that it's basically a junk email account. Like, I get a voluminous amount of junk mail constantly in my email. And so it's no longer really, like, I have to wade through it. If you want to get my attention, send me a text. Now, because you can do speech to text, I get these text messages from students, and again, I'm like, can you limit this to like 120 characters, please? Because I don't need your life story if what you want is to, get an extension on something. Just like send me a short, brief text. But email, it's become, I am like a man going to the gallows when I open up my email account every day and have to go through it. And it's likely that, something's going to get lost in there. So if you really want to get a hold of me, you send me a text message. I'm out of time, so we'll finish up with talking about direct marketing, and then we'll talk about measuring next time. And I think that's the last class period, and then your IMC plans are due. I understand that you have sent out an email and asked if you all wanted to do it. If you want to do it as a group, that's fine. If you want, that would be most efficient. The problem with group work is that there's always somebody who wants to be a free rider, in my experience, right? All right, so if you got ducks, let me stop the video, and then I will give you your, why is this not? I'll give you your points for today.